Okay, you probably wonder what you can do with your real estate license in California. Okay, so for a California real estate license, matter of fact, there's a couple of different things that you can do with your license. And first of all, let's go ahead and look at, tell you who I am. I'm Brian Church. I'm the founder and also board of directors for Accredited Real Estate Schools, Inc. And I've been a real estate broker for almost 30 years now. And I've been doing exam preparation in California for 20 years. I'm also a former university professor as well, and I've done a lot of real estate brokerage, and also I've done just about everything we're going to be covering in here. I've done at some point in the past. So let's go ahead and go through and see what you can do with your real estate license. First thing you can do is real estate sales, okay? And there is existing single-family homes, and there's also new single-family homes. And so this is a little overview we'll go through, then I'll go through each one, explain how they work. Okay, so then we have also income properties, residential and leased investments, and we have leasing of commercial, leasing of leased investments. We have land, which is raw, vacant land. We have business opportunities, and we have loan brokering and property management. Okay, so those are our things that you can do with your real estate license. There's quite a few of them, actually. Okay, let's look at each one here. And of course, remember, there's different ones for property management. Okay, and then of course, that takes a limited to the broker license. Now, here's what the broker's license is: California real estate broker. What you have to do there is you have to get your broker's license to actually broker and sell these things. However, if you get a salesperson license, California real estate salesperson license, you can work under a broker and you can do all these activities. And most of the people who come into the business usually start as a salesperson. That's how I did it. And then they might turn onto a broker later on down the road, but they'll come in as a salesperson, work under a broker, and do one of these types of activities. So let's go through each one of these and see if we can explain how they work to you so you understand how they do. First thing is existing single-family home sales. Okay, and this is most new agents start their career in doing resale single-family homes. Those are existing homes. They're all over California, and everyone you know is a potential client, which is great. Okay. Another thing too about them is they're also one of the easiest to understand because what happens is that most people have lived in homes for quite a long period of time, and they're also fairly easy to value through the comparison market data approach. We will look at properties that have sold on the market recently, as close as possible geographically, and of course, as close as possible geographically, and as close as possible and from a construction standpoint, right, to the subject property. And we'll compare them to our subject property. That's called a sales comparable. And so they're a little easier to use than some of the other ones when we deal with income properties. Okay, so that's a good way to do that. And you can actually start selling the minimal training, because what happens is you can go and out and you can learn fairly quickly some of the techniques that are needed to sell existing single-family homes. And then remember, you'll have either a sales manager or a broker who's going to be going over your material, your contracts and your disclosures to make sure everything is in good shape. Okay, and many new brokerage companies are looking to recruit new agents. And what you're looking at there is small versus large companies. And each one has its advantage. The large companies have usually a formalized training program of maybe a week or 2 weeks, depending on how they set that up, to basically get you started. And then, of course, you'll learn as you go, as you're selling resale single-family homes, existing ones. Now, small companies have an advantage because the broker may have a lot of referrals for you that can actually give you business. Okay, so that's why the large ones usually have to find your own business, but they're big. They have big names, and you'll get a lot of clients who will do business with you because they've heard of your name. Small companies aren't as well known, but the broker may have leads. So they both have their place. And so when you get into the real estate resale single-family business, what you want to do is interview the brokers or sales managers in those offices and see one that's, number one, as close to your home as possible so you don't have to drive very far. And two, it has a sales manager or broker who you think you can work with. Okay, so it's really important. And of course, you also have freedom and flexibility with this one because you're your own boss. This is where an entrepreneur does very well, because when you come in, you're your own, running your own business here. You're an independent contractor from a tax and also for unemployment insurance standpoint, but you're considered an employee from a legal standpoint. So, but you of course have to collect all your own taxes and usually pay them quarterly as you're getting commission income. And so you have that freedom, you have the flexibility, but remember you can also work a lot of hours because most of the clients are available on weekends and on evenings. So you can work a lot of hours, and you have to make sure you take some time off when you're doing these resale homes. Also, there's a concern for financial reserves. You need to make sure that you have some type of financial reserves, because you'll have your back to the wall when you come in doing this, the business. You got to get hooked up, right, with your association, local association, probably also set up with California Association and National Association of Realtors, because most likely your broker will be a member of that, and as a salesperson you'll be required to do that. Also, California Association of Realtors has really good contracts. They update them all the time electronically. So to have access to those, you'll have to become a member of the three, your local association, CAR and NAR. Also, you're going to probably have to get hooked up with the multiple listing service, so you have access to all the properties that are coming on the market. So you're working with buyers, or you can, of course, work with sellers. You can put those in the multiple listing service so all the other agents can see it and hopefully bring in one of their buyers to cooperate with you and sell the property. Okay, so you don't want your back to the wall too much on those, because you have to come up with some money to get into this thing. And then you also have to have some money to live until you can get things going where you got some commission income. If you have a spouse who has a full-time job and has benefits, that's an awesome situation, because you can go into the business without having as precarious a situation as you would if you have to do it on your own with no other help. Of course, when you're on your own with no other help, it's amazing how motivated you can be to make sure and get some deals in the contract and close, get some commission income coming in. But if you have a spouse who has a job and has the benefits, then you don't save a lot of money because you don't have to pay for your benefits. And also, you're not pressured as much to try to close as many deals as possible just so you can survive and live. Okay, so that's a concern that they have. And remember that one of the obstacles starting a new business, and you're learning the real estate business at the same time. It'll be like you're going into the flower arranging business, and you're selling flowers, whatever. And so you're selling flowers, right? But you don't know anything about it. So you got to put your business together, and then you're going to learn as you go. It's the same thing with real estate, right? It's the same. It's a business. You're learning the real estate business, and you learn as you go. Okay. The good news is with the broker being there, they can a lot of times help you move through on your transactions and get them closed the first few that you have, so that way you get some commission income coming in early. And remember, every time you do a transaction, you really learn a lot. So each time you do a deal, you're going to be getting more and more knowledgeable to the point where you'll actually be able to be very competent within a really short period of time, knowing at least how they work and how they go together. Okay, so that's going to be existing single-family homes. Great place to start. There's all over California. Everybody you know is a potential client, either to sell or buy, right? And of course, when you market to them, make sure that sphere of influence, people who you know, you're constantly letting them and reminding them that you are in the real estate business and that they need to refer clients, their friends, and everyone who will be clients to you. And remember, past clients will also be a referral base as well for future business. So you take care of your clients, they'll take care of you. Okay, so that's existing homes. Then we have new single-family homes. And what happens with new single-family homes, they have model homes. It's a great environment to set your hours. There's a retail mentality. And usually you start as a retail sales agent, but you're not out and about. So here's how it happens with new home sales. I've been a custom home builder. I've also been a broker where I've handled subdivisions for builders where we actually sold them out. I had a crew that went in a few different times where we've sold out anywhere from 70 to 100 houses, usually meaning real smaller type builders. And what we do is we have the model homes. They're usually put together in one of the garages on one of the properties, and they'll have all their model homes, as many as they can put together, usually already built and ready to go, so they can show it to the prospective buyers. Now, when you're in new homes, you're going to be working under a broker who's probably working for the new home builder. They're under their broker's license. A lot of times you'll be working in those model homes, so it's a great environment because it's air conditioned. So if you're in hot areas of California, which is pretty much most of Southern California and the Central Valley and Northern California, along not counting the coasts, Big plus, because that's a growth area for these types of properties. And you can, basically have set hours. They have hours when they're open, so you don't have to be working on weekends every week. Usually you'll work maybe 2 weekends a month. Excuse me. It's a couple of weekends a month, but you'll have some time off, and it's off. Doing resale single-family homes, you're working all the time. Whenever your clients, want to look at a property or whatever, you got to be ready to go. Whereas here, you're set, and it's a retail mentality, because you are going to be there waiting for your clients, the potential customers, to come in. A lot of times you'll start off as a relief sales agent. You'll come in and relieve the subdivision, whoever has the subdivision. Usually they'll have an experienced agent who is selling out that subdivision. And he or she will be, they'll know how many houses they have, they know the total amount of income and how much money they're going to make when they sell out the entire thing. They usually get a percentage of each of the sales. Okay, and as a relief agent, you'll come in and relieve them, and then from there, you will probably go in from there to maybe having your own subdivision down the road. So that's how you would start out. And sometimes there's even these temporary agencies where you can go in on weekends and just kind of sit down, and you get to meet everybody. If they like you, they may hire you. But you're not going to be out and about. You're going to be actually in the model home. And so if you're the type of person who likes to be out and about, the freedom, this may not be as useful for you as a resale type thing. But if you like being in one place, people coming to you, and then a lot of times those properties sell themselves because they're so they're new, and if they're priced right, usually they'll sell themselves, so you don't have a lot of work selling them. Just a matter of getting the potential buyer to the point where you close of escrow. And the problem with this one is that the build out might be 6 to 9, even 12 months, depending on the market. And so you're going to have a long period of time between the time you sell the property and the time that it actually closes, when they complete the sale. Okay, with the resale single-family homes, you're going to have a 30 to 45-day escrow period, usually from the time that you sell the properties, the time they agree to the contract, to the time you actually close it, which might be, like I said, 30 to 45 days. Whereas with the new ones, could be as long as 12 months or even more pushed out to close, unless you're dealing with the standing inventory, which they call quick move-ins. Those are ones that the builder already has built. Maybe the buyer could not qualify for the loan or decide not to buy it. They would lose some of their deposit because of that. Then the builder would resell that to someone else. Okay, and those can close a lot more quickly because they're already built a lot of times. So that's going to be new home sales. Good place to be. Good money when they're building. When they're not building, when the building is not going on, resale is probably a better place to be, because people are always going to be selling resale homes all the time. They always have to sell, whereas new homes usually are cyclical, where they do a lot of building during an upward trending seller's market. Then during a downward trending buyer's market, they don't do a lot of selling, so you're really not going to be wanting to be in that. Some of the agents will move back and forth between resale and new home sales depending on the market and what is the best from a financial standpoint. Okay, so that's new home sales. And next thing we have is commercial leasing. And with commercial leasing, easy for new agents to master. If you're going into commercial, which is going to be leasing out shopping centers, office buildings, industrial properties, leasing them, not selling them. So you actually find tenants for them, and the owners will pay you a commission. Okay, so it's easier to lease them out than it is to sell these properties when you first start out, especially. And it may lead to investment transactions down the road, because the contacts you have that are doing leasing are also going to be doing transactions. And I've done commercial leasing. Usually I do it incidental to when I'm selling a commercial property, and I've sold quite a few commercial properties. We'll cover that in a little bit. Okay, so it may lead to investment transactions, and leasing commissions are usually a percentage of the total lease amount. So what happens is they usually pay us, for example, I had one where I had an office building listed for a year to sell. We had about 4,000 square feet or so that was vacant in the office building, and so what I did is I put a lease sign out in the front, and of course I didn't put anything for sale, because I was trying to find the right buyers, to buy it. But I had a person call, a leasing agent call me up, said he has a tenant to lease the space, and I said, great, let's show it to him. We did, and we each received a commission. And what the commission is the longer you can get a lease negotiate it out, the bigger your commission usually. Now they may use a sliding scale, like 5% of the lease amount first year, 4% second year, 3% third year, and then 3, maybe 4 and 5. And what they do is they'll give you a little bit more money as longer you can get a lease. I think we signed a 5-year lease on that one, if I remember right, I think. And so what we did is we each got a commission. We split it 50-50. So it was nice. I think we made about $4,000, $5,000 each, I think, which wasn't bad. The sale of the property, though, was where the big money was. I think it was around $40,000 to $50,000 each in commissions when I sold it to using another broker representing the buyer. So that's the big money is in your investment. But remember, you don't want to start there. You want to start in the leasing because that's where you might make $5,000, but it's easier $5,000. What it is it's, when you go after big properties, it's like you're elephant hunting. And if you're going to leases, it's like you're mouse hunting. So it's a lot easier to find mice than it is elephants. So you want to go after leasing ahead of time till you get experience and you get some financial net worth. So that way you're not as worried about commissions as they close. So leasing is a good place to start. Okay. And the more dollars per square foot, the greater the square footage, longer lease length, more commission income. So that's incentive for the leasing agent to try to get as long a lease as possible, which is in the best interest of the property owner, right? They also want to get higher cost per square foot, in other words, rent per square foot, to increase the income for the owner. So that, of course, increases the value of that property significantly as well. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second, how that works. And of course, that would be something like maybe retail, shopping center, office buildings, and then of course maybe industrial. Those are the 3 main ones. There's a lot of specialty properties out there, but if you're really, really new, you want to stay away from them. You want to stay just with the mainstream stuff where you have a lot of them around. Okay, in California, there's lots of strip centers out there. So those little small shopping centers that we have, lots and lots around there. Okay, so that's commercial leasing. Now, commercial investment is a little bit different. Now, we use the term commercial even for apartments because what happens is we have large apartment buildings, you have shopping centers, office buildings, industrial properties. What happens is you have investors, a lot of times there's a progression. They start off with a lot of times single-family homes as an investment. Okay, and so what happens is when you're doing your existing resale single-family homes, not only are you going to have owner-occupants, you're also going to have some investors who come in and buy the property and then rent it to a tenant. Okay, so the good news is that the process is about the same. They're a little bit different in terms of the financing for a lot of times the investors come with a lot of times all cash in today's market. And so that is going to be a big difference in the difference between the homes investments and the other ones are commercial. Okay, so you've got home investments, so either owner-occupied or single-family home investments. They might be condos as well. But then you get into the bigger ones, the apartment buildings. And usually they'll start off with a single-family home, and then they'll go to maybe a smaller apartment buildings, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. Then they'll go into bigger apartment buildings, and then bigger ones. Then eventually they'll go on and they'll say, you know what, there's too much management intensity with these apartment buildings. So let's go ahead and maybe move into leased investments. And those would be the shopping center, office buildings, and industrial properties. So they move into the leased investments, and it's less management intensity. And then they'll go from there as they get near maybe their retirement age. The investor will a lot of times go to a single tenant retail type building that only has one tenant on a long-term lease, a very strong tenant. I've done sale leasebacks with some of these companies that we've used where we've had investors come in and they'll buy a property that might be, say, 6,000 square foot single tenant retail, and the tenant is a national tenant. They'll sign a long-term lease. We call it a boilerplate lease, long-term lease. And then what will happen is that the investor comes in and buys that, and that building is owned by the actual company that's in there. I was working with an auto parts chain of auto parts stores, and what they would do is they would build it, sell the land and building to an investor, take a long-term lease called a sale leaseback, and then they would take that money and go buy other properties and keep expanding. It was a financing technique to expand. So what happens is they'll start with a single family, go to small apartments, they'll go to big apartments, then they'll go to leased investments, and then end with single tenant retail. Now, when the market gets really, really rough, what happens is all those guys in that single tenant retail and all leased investments, when the economy is very bad and there's a lot of vacancy in shopping centers and office buildings, and it's industrial, they'll actually revert back to their apartment buildings. So you'll see actually they'll go back around in a circle and actually hit the apartment buildings as the risk increases for the leased investments, okay? So this is an area you want to go after you've already done some commercial leasing for a while, have contacts, right? Or you have some experience in the business, you kind of know what's going on. You can kind of go into this arena. The percentage of closings, in other words, the stuff you get into escrow versus what it closed, is significantly less in commercial investments than it is in single-family homes. Single-family homes, family, owner-occupied, 80+% probably close rate on stuff that you get into escrow. With these type of things, less than 50, and it really depends. A lot of them are what we call exchange buyers, doing what we call a 1031 tax deferred, which is postponed, exchange. They postpone their capital gains taxes. And so they're under some provisions in terms of they have to identify and close on those properties during certain periods of time. So that can be a big driver in this market. So anyway, bottom line, don't start here. Start with leasing and then go into this, or start with the single family, then move into this. But once you get some experience, you can definitely go in here and get some nice commission income too that comes from this. Okay, so that's our commercial sales. And let's go to the sale of land. And with land, what happens here is it's lucrative but difficult to start in this area because a lot of times land is going to be being purchased by two different buyers. Either it's going to be purchased by someone who is going to take raw land, like it's agricultural zoned, and it's going to change the zoning to something that can be built on, like maybe single family homes. And that person's going to be different than the one who's actually going to build on it. Okay, so the first one is someone who goes in and changes the zoning. That's very, very political. So when you're dealing with people like that, they are very, very well entrenched with the local political system, boards of supervisors, building departments, where they can get things done. Okay, so what they'll do is they'll buy a property, and I sold some raw land to one of those guys a few years ago. Bought the property for, I think it was $3 million, I think at the time, and then resold it to a big builder for $4 million. So they made $1 million by changing it from, I think it was agricultural reserve to RD5, which is 5 dwelling units per acre for single family homes. Okay, so what happens is that you have two different buyers there. You have one that's politically connected, and then you have the builder. The builder doesn't want to deal with all the political problems. So what the builder will do is they'll buy it from the person who already has it zoned for single family homes, okay? And so when you do these type of deals, they're usually big. They do fall out of contract. There's a lot of different things, options and things, because finding the happy medium between the landowner and the developer can be a little bit tricky. So again, this is probably for something to do after you've been in the business for a while. Sometimes sell land developers, not the builders, can be conveyed to the highest and best use. In other words, goes from agricultural to residential. Okay. Another thing too we have is options. You see a lot of options in land. And the reason for this is because let's say that a builder comes in, and it's one of the big builders, national builders, there's a whole bunch of them. And they want to build on, 30, 40 acres, whatever it is, a certain number of homes on there. But they're not real sure about the market because it's an upward trending seller's market, and that's where they want to build, but they don't want to get stuck with the land and not have the properties built and sold before it turns into a downward trending buyer's market. And it's very difficult to try to figure out what is going to be the top, because usually a lot of times you'll have false tops and false bottoms, and 6 months later you'll actually know when it actually tops. Well, they don't know that, so what they do is they may do an option where they'll put a certain amount of money, say $50,000, they'll give as consideration for the option to the landowner to buy this property for maybe $2 million for the next 2 years or the next year. It could be any time period, right? So what they'll do is they'll get that $50,000, they'll do all their work to see what kind of density they can get, which is dwelling units per acre, and then based on what the zoning is going to be or is, and then what they'll do is they'll decide whether they're going to go forward and exercise the option. And if the market turns on during that period, they will not exercise the option, and of course the landowner will keep the $50,000 consideration for the option, but the builder would not come up with the other amount of money to buy the property. Okay, so that's land options are huge in this area. You got to know what you're doing. So again, very difficult to start here, but maybe a place to go in the future. Also, usually large transactions are lengthy to complete, and they have a high fallout rate. These have a very high fallout rate because you have builders buying them. And if they're buying them during an upward trending seller's market, they could really go in and out of escrow multiple times. If you're selling these, by the way, during a downward trending buyer's market near the bottom, a lot of times they'll stay in there because of course, the builder knows they're getting a great deal. A lot of the builders I know, and I've done this too, will go out and buy land when everybody's in the, crying the blues because the market's on the way down, and we'll go be buying land during that period, right? And then, of course, holding it until the next upward trending seller's market, then build on it and sell and take all the profits. So that's what they typically will do. Okay, and then also a big concern is financial reserves. If you're going to be selling these kind of properties, you need to have some pretty serious, wealth situation. Have some money in the bank, and you can live without, any commission income. Okay, let's talk about business opportunities. You can actually sell businesses with this real estate license you're getting. Remember, if you have a salesperson license, you have to put it under a broker. But remember, you can sell business opportunities, and this could be a good place to start if you have had some. Matter of fact, it's going to be a really good place to start if you've had some background, you've owned a business in the past. Maybe you have an MBA or something where you have some business, background or knowledge. This could be a place where you could actually do some business. And of course, it's easy to find investors because you know where to find them right at their business. These are usually small businesses where you're not dealing with, big, large business, but smaller ones. And of course, a lot of times they're owner operators, so it's not great trying to meet them. You just got to go in there and talk to them. And it can also be challenging due to confidentiality issues because once they have the information, they don't want to give that information out to their competitors. So what will happen is any buyers are going to have to sign confidentiality agreements for any information they have on the business. A lot of times even know what the business name is and where it's located. Sometimes we'll have to sign a confidentiality agreement before they'll even do that. Okay, and then commissions are generally a greater percentage than real estate sales because you're dealing with a lot of work and the dollar amount can be a little bit less than you're dealing with real estate. So, and that's business opportunities. Okay, so you can do that. Another thing you can do with your license is loan brokering. You can actually do loans, originate loans. And this has been very popular up until about 2008. Way back in 2008, what happened is that we had some problems from 2001 to 2008 where they had we call it the subprime mortgage situation. It wasn't really subprime loans caused it. It was lenders making loans and then selling these securities all over the world to investors who didn't have any idea that they were buying really worthless securities because they were making loans to people who couldn't even afford to get a cell phone, but they could afford to get a loan to buy a house. So loan brokering got a little bit of a bad name, and it still actually has gone through. And then there's been some new changes that were made. One of them is you have to get some licensing. Okay, so let's go through this first here. Loan broker prospects for and finds potential borrowers, originates loans with them, sells originated loans to wholesale lenders, and receives a commission for their services. The mortgage brokers have really declined, though, since then because most of the mortgage companies went out of business. And, of course, the big banks have kind of consolidated that a little bit. So you can still go into this business, not as attractive as it used to be. And the big thing there is that it can be a good place to start. And there's two markets usually, purchases and refinances. So the thing is you can use it for getting a loan to purchase a property, also for refinancing an existing loan when interest rates go down. Okay, and you pay your commission and the loans are closed, usually close of escrow on a purchase and then when the loan closes on a refinance. And there's some wholesale lending involved. Important consideration is the NMLS license, National Mortgage Licensing System, NMLS. This came in several years ago. They finally made their changes back in October 2015. They made their final changes on all the things that they're going to be doing. So they've changed some of the disclosures and closing forms. And it's actually much easier for the borrowers to get a loan now, notice and understand the loan that they're actually getting. It's also very cut and dried as to what you can charge for these loans. And again, they've been having a real problem with a bad image because of what happened all the way back in 2008 2008, and they're, from 2001 to 2008, and they're still dealing with that, years later. This could be a good place to go into, but remember, you have to get your real estate license, or you go through the Department of Corporations as well. But then you also have to get your NMLS license nationally, and also California specific when passing the exams, taking the tests. The problem with this is that in the past, there's a lot of licensing, and there really hasn't been as much money there as there was in other areas. So we haven't really even been suggesting to our students even going into doing loans here for the last several years. And it may change in the future, but I'm not sure when. Most of our people are making more money doing the resale, single-family homes, new home sales, and doing leasing and commercial type stuff, and also property management. Okay, so loan brokering is there. It has been a good place to start. Really take a look at it though before you go into this particular area. Okay, and get loan approval. Okay, now next thing we have property management. Now this is a really good place to start because a lot of times as a property manager, you will get paid a hourly or a salary, which is really not what you would see in any of the other areas that you can use your license in. But property management a lot of times will start you with that. So this is a place where it has some security. Now the upside in terms of income isn't as high because of that security, but you can start off here. Okay, so what happens is it's a great place to enter the real estate business because of that reason. May manage a portfolio of single-family homes, apartments, leased investments, usually paid a salary and bonus based on occupancy rates and cost-cutting abilities. Now, for apartment buildings of 16 or more units, they require an on-site manager. That on-site manager does not have to be licensed. A lot of times we'll use a husband, wife, or two spouses to manage those properties, giving them a free unit to live in and then a salary on top of that. Okay, the off-site manager must be licensed, and that's the one who deals directly with the owner of the property. And they're the ones who usually will hire the on-site manager. Okay, so with apartment buildings, that's how those kind of work. And property management fees are usually around 10% or so, 8 to 10% for single-family resale, single-family homes where you buy one, and you of course put a tenant in there and charge about 8 to 10% of the collected rents. Large apartment buildings would go down to as low as 3% or so of the collected rents to pay for the off-site property manager. So this is a good place because of the stability. Because remember, these properties are going to be rented whether the market's going up or going down for sale of single-family homes or for investment properties. So even though it's going up or down, you're always going to have property management. So this is a very, very steady area of the business. Okay. Also, you may be responsible for leasing and tenant management, walkthrough inspections, maintenance, dealing with maintenance calls from tenants, and then also you're the tenant point of contact. You're an insulator between the owner of the building and the tenant. And so that's what your job is and what you're paid to do. And I manage properties right now. Some of my own properties, I have property managers that in certain areas, I hire property managers to manage them when they're too far away geographically for me to do that. Okay, so you'll probably do the same thing as you get in the business. You start maybe acquiring some properties. You may manage them if they're close to you, but they're not. You'll hire a property manager off-site. Get a good professional one. Property owners usually pay 7 to 10 single-family the rents, and large apartment buildings might be as low as 3, like we mentioned. Management of leased investments is similar to residential, except commercial tenants usually have long-term leases and a business mindset. Yeah, these might look at 3 to 5 year leases, depending on what, or even longer if they're larger tenants. And they're looking at a business mindset. Okay, if I rent this, what kind of exposure am I going to get? What kind of maintenance am I going to get? Prompt maintenance if the roof is leaking. Different issues that come up. I've had all these things come up. I had an air conditioning unit go out on one of my real estate schools, and the tenant was a deadbeat tenant, just didn't show up. So I actually went in and had the thing repaired that day because I had a class coming in of 100 people and it was 100 degrees outside. So I just did it, had it done. I told the guy, hey, we're not even expecting you to pay for it. We just have to have some type of response. And the owner actually ended up paying for that HVAC because we were a really good tenant of theirs. But sometimes they have to have a business mindset when you're a property manager, because that's a huge amount of business that they're riding on things going correctly and moving quickly and promptly. Okay, so that's going to be property management. Great place to be. Strongly suggest this one for new people coming into the business. Also, a good thing is that when you manage properties, you get to know the owners, and you will actually get a chance to do some transactions, because I had one property that I had a property manager managing in another state outside California, and I was going to sell that property. I went to the property manager and I had her sell the property for me. She did a really good job too, by the way. And so she ended up getting the commission income, and then of course that was sold to an owner-occupied buyer, so she didn't get any more property management income. Okay, so you get a lot of business that comes out of that. It happens with commercial as well. And commercial type, when you're managing like an office building type thing, a lot of times they'll have a manager in the building if it's a large office building. And I had one group that was a foreign investment group, and what they did is they had the investors outside of the United States. They had a person in California that managed all of their office buildings, and then each one of the office buildings had a property manager working in them, was paid very well, by the way. So it's a very good business to be in. It paid very well. And the person here just kind of hired and fired all the managers of their buildings. They had about 25 office buildings. So that's kind of how the commercial end of that works. Okay. We also have a disclaimer here. Please be advised that the information contained in this video is for informational purposes only, should not be your sole source of information. Prior to making career decisions, please consult with professionals in their chosen career fields prior to embarking on a career path. And so with that, my business is Accredited Real Estate Schools, and we have one of the school locations in Fair Oaks, California. We also have a very, very nice internet streaming exam preparation video, and we have a demo video. So if you want to take a look at our website, you can take a look at the exam prep video. It's me teaching the class, and maybe you can use that to get into the real estate business. Thanks.